Hello and welcome to our very first YouTube video on the channel of Coast to Coast Hockey. Today, we're going to be previewing the San Jose Sharks as the first part of our 32-part series previewing all NHL teams coming into the next season. My name is Cameron.
I'm Noel.
And I'm Nick.
Let's get started. So beginning with some key offseason moves that the team made this season, uh, three big ones there are Anthony Duclair, Mackenzie Blackwood, and Philip Zadina that we're going to get into a bit more in
Mhm.
a second. Other notable names coming in here to San Jose are Jan Ruda, Mikhail Granlund, and Mike Hoffman, who all came over as part of that massive Erik Karlsson trade that Noel's going to talk about here.
Yeah, so Erik Karlsson is the key subtraction that the San Jose Sharks have lost, the reigning Norris Trophy winner. Obviously, that leaves a massive hole on the blue line for them to fill. Think about all those. He was on for, I saw a stat, 64% of the San Jose Sharks goals. So that's a lot of offense that they're losing right there, and from a defenseman, too. Some other key subtractions that they lost is James Reimer, the Kitchener-Waterloo boy, Steven Lawrence, Evgeny Svechnikov and Noah Gregor, some other fringe players, Andreas Janssen too, some former Leafs there.
Awesome.
Among the group of acquisitions, Anthony Duclair, Mackenzie Blackwood, and Philip Zadina were the biggest arrivals for the team. Anthony Duclair, formerly of the Florida Panthers, had some great seasons with the likes of Alexander Barkov, Sam Reinhart, Sam Bennett, and Matthew Tkachuk as his line mates. Now coming to San Jose to a depleted roster, it'll be interesting to see how well he does offensively as he reached 30 goals, 20 goals in separate seasons. He is only on a 1 year contract for $3 million, and he has battled some injuries, such as an Achilles injury last year. So it'll be interesting to see how he does in San Jose.
And moving on to Mackenzie Blackwood, this is a goalie who had super high upside at one point when he was coming out of junior into the NHL. I know a lot of people had super high hopes for him, myself included. I personally thought he was going to be the future goaltender of the Canadian Olympic team. Um, they bring him in a trade with the New Jersey Devils. He had a pretty miserable season last year in 22 games, a save percentage of sub 900 at 893 and pretty high goals against, also spending some time in the AHL. So it's going to be a huge test for him to see if he can bounce back with San Jose, but that's going to be pretty difficult playing in front of a very depleted roster.
And Philip Zadina was brought in as kind of a low risk, high reward move here by the Sharks. He has a $1.1 million cap hit for 1 year and will be an RFA at the end of this so they can retain his rights. Last year with Detroit, Zadina only had a measly 7 points in 30 games. So for a draft pick, for number one, or sorry, round one, sixth overall draft pick in 2018, that's pretty pathetic. So we'll see how he can do here, given I'm assuming an elevated opportunity with the Sharks. He's going to have a lot of ice time and a big chance to fill the net with pucks.
One thing to note is that he'll also be an RFA at the end of this year, so the Sharks could retain his rights should he have a great year in San Jose.
Moving on to the future outlook for the San Jose Sharks. So this is incorporating some of the picks that they made at this most recent draft. We can see they have really great depth at the center position in their prospect pool with the likes of Will Smith, William Eklund, Philip Bystedt, and Thomas Bordeleau there. Quentin Musty is also a very interesting prospect added at the last draft. And moving on to the draft capital, which Noel touched on here.
Yeah, they've accrued quite the draft capital here through their trades with Pittsburgh and the Erik Karlsson deal, and also the Timo Meyer deal. They have two first round picks coming up in 2024, as well as two second round picks, and they're looking to make some big moves here with this draft, hoping to build even more impressive prospect core.
So now we're going to pass it off to Nick here to go a little bit more in depth on some of the prospects we just mentioned by name.
San Jose boasts such a strong prospect pool that it was hard to pick three to be in our prospect spotlight. William Eklund, Will Smith, and Philip Bystedt are the three we chose today to highlight. First, with William Eklund. This is a 5'10" forward who played in the AHL last year as a rookie and had pretty great numbers, 41 points in 54 games. There aren't that many AHL rookies doing what he is doing with San Jose Barracuda. Secondly, Will Smith is a very, very crafty, very speedy, electric forward who played with the U.S. national team in the USHL last year. And as most talented U.S. national development players do, he put up way over a point per game and lit it up. And now he's off to college or he might make the team out of camp, but it is unlikely that either Eklund or Smith will make the team, unfortunately, because of the roster construction under GM Mike Greer. The third prospect of note is Philip Bystedt. This is a complete contrast to the prospect style that San Jose has been drafting in recent years. Philip Bystedt is a massive power forward, 6'4", almost 200 pounds, and he played in the men's league in Sweden last year and had some great numbers for such a young age. It is often that these players are going to be playing in very few minutes in these pro men's European leagues, but Philip Bystedt showed up, put up almost half a point a game, and I could see him transitioning very well to AHL pro leagues.
Moving on from the off-ice moves and future outlook of the San Jose Sharks, we're going to take a look at the projected lineup that they have going into next season, starting with the forwards. So as you can see, that first line there is actually somewhat solid for a team that's supposed to be rebuilding with Alexander Barabanov, Thomas Hertl, and Kevin Labanc, all three solid players who could be playing in the top 6 or top 9 of other NHL teams. Moving on to the second line, we have Mike Hoffman, Logan Couture, and Anthony Duclair. Again, another solid line. Maybe Mike Hoffman's out of place in an NHL top 6, but still a pretty solid line there for the second line. And then moving on to the third line, we have Philip Zadina, Mikael Granlund, and Fabian Zetterlund, all guys who could probably move up the lineup in case of injury. With Zadina and Zetterlund, we kind of have some high upside guys who might be able to develop into something more for San Jose moving into the future. With Mikael Granlund, we have a player who's looking to bounce back after a pretty brutal second half to his season last year in Pittsburgh. A guy who's pass first and has been known to put up quite a few points in the past. We'll see if he can replicate that in San Jose. As for the fourth line, we have Oscar Lindbaum, Nico Sturm, and Luke Kunin. Sturm and Kunin are two players that I actually really like. Sturm's more defensive-minded, and Kunin has been known to play a bit more physical and had a pretty good season last year. I know some fantasy owners streamed him, like myself.
Yeah, he
As for
came in
the
clutch for me
extras,
at one point.
exactly. As for the extras, the one to point out there is William Macklin, as he's going to be fighting for a roster spot. It'd be great to see him play in the middle 6 there, but as Nick mentioned earlier, it's been some questionable construction here to not give some of those younger players a chance. And we'll see if he's able to push somebody out, maybe move to the wing and play it in the top 9, because he's not a player you'd like to see play on the bottom line there. And then Giovanni Smith's another player who might push for some playing time as well.
Onto the defense, you're looking at some rough spots. A bright spot is Mario Ferraro. He's a quick skater with a good stick, an active stick on defense. But following him and Jan Rutta, you've got Mark-Edouard Vlasic in the 4th year of his 7-year deal at $7 million AAV. This is a tough spot for San Jose. They already had to move out Erik Karlsson and Brent Burns primarily because of salary issues. So Mark-Edouard Vlasic still being here and still taking a spot from a younger player such as Nikola Kanishev is questionable. Also, you're looking at players like Matt Benning and Radim Simek, as well as Kyle Burrows, as depth options, guys who have previously played on top lines in the AHL, who are now thrusted into top 6s in the NHL. Jan Rutta is the most recent acquisition that has now been put on the top pair at right defense. This is the former Stanley Cup winning Tampa Bay third pair defenseman who is now forced to play all the tough minutes alongside Mario Ferraro this year for San Jose.
I think that Mark-Edouard Vlasic still being here really shows how bad of a contract he's on. Like, he's not good enough of a player to move even with that $7 million cap hit. So they moved out Brent Burns, moved out Erik Karlsson. Somehow they got rid of that contract, but Mark-Edouard Vlasic's still here with that unmovable 7x7.
Yeah, it's absolutely unmovable. It's something that there's no value added for a team wanting this guy. There is really no value added by returning salary, retaining it. They can't retain it anymore because of this Karlsson and Burns trades saga, unfortunately, as well.
Yeah, I totally agree. It's also unfortunate because you look at a player who's kind of at the tail end of his career, and he'd probably like to be playing meaningful games, but it's just that contract is prohibitive. And even at 50% retention, if they use their last retention spot on him, it would still be 3.5 million, which is still probably too rich for most
You'd be
teams.
giving up assets to get rid of him.
Exactly.
Yeah. The biggest piece to Vlasic is his skating. He has unfortunately lost the legs.
Bricks for feet.
Yeah, he's lost the legs unfortunately to keep up with the high octane forwards. Like in practice, I could assume Will Smith versus him. Will Smith beats him 10 out of 10 times off the rush 1-on-1. It's unfortunate that he's lost the legs because he was once a premier defensive defenseman, but to be a premier defensive defenseman, you need the legs to catch up in transition, which is a piece of most of the best offenses in the NHL.
And finally, here we're on to the goalie depth. So we have Capo Kakinen, we have Mackenzie Blackwood, and I'm sorry, I've never heard of this guy, Itu Makiniemi. Antti Niemi right there. Antti Niemi's long lost cousin. It's really up for debate who's going to take this starting job. Capo Kakinen had a solid year last year, given he was on the Sharks, and then Mackenzie Blackwood is again looking to bounce back here. So which one of them is going to take the reins? We aren't quite sure. I could see it being either one, honestly. But again, both of these guys have a terrible team in front of them, so they aren't looking to have a too hot of a season.
Personally, my money's on Macklin.
Yeah, for sure.
So moving on to the next segment of our season preview for the San Jose Sharks, we're going to take a look at 2023, 2024 storylines that are surrounding the team right now. So the first one here is really just a kind of an open question of what is GM Mike Grier doing? Like, quite honestly, he's made some questionable decisions since he's taken over the team a couple of years ago. The big ones that really stick out to me are, first of all, the return for Timo Meier. I really thought he kind of waited too long there and maybe would have been able to get a better return if he had pulled the trigger earlier. I think a lot of people thought the return was somewhat underwhelming. As with the Erik Karlsson trade, I mean, he was kind of in a tough situation, which you could look at he made the best of it, but at the same time, again, he might have waited too long and sold low on the reigning Norris Trophy winning defenseman, and also from the perspective that if you're going to retain money, you may as well retain a bit more if you're not expected to be good and hopefully recoup some more assets. The getting a first round pick for Erik Karlsson with retention really is quite underwhelming. So even though he made the best of a bad situation, you have to wonder if he was willing to take on more money on his cap sheet if he would have been able to get a king's ransom for Erik Karlsson from the Carolina Hurricanes or from the Pittsburgh Penguins, all the teams that were interested in him. And then just more generally, it's really questionable what direction he's taking this team in, as it seems he's committing to a rebuild, but at the same time, he's brought in 5 serviceable veterans this offseason who are probably going to contribute well to this team and take spots away from younger players like William Eklund, who really should get a shot in the NHL at this point of his career.
And another point I want to bring up is, will the Sharks and Mike Grier regret on passing up Matvei Michkov in this draft?
Yeah.
I don't know what really goes on behind closed doors. Like Michkov may have refused to like sign with the team Pula Lindros. I know there was some rumors about him doing that with teams and him wanting to go to Philly, but I wonder if we'll come to see in the years that they really regret not drafting Michkov. I mean, no knock on Will Smith. He's going to be an amazing player, but I think it's pretty consensus that Michkov is better and probably the second best player in this draft behind Bedard.
Yeah, and we're also looking at a rookie GM practically.
Yeah.
We don't want to question his negotiation ability, but we're looking at a guy who's going up against veterans of 20 plus years of negotiating and making deals. So things like the Erik Karlsson deal that should be maybe your biggest deal of your entire GM career, having to be in your very first year with the team is a very tough spot to be put in.
Yeah, 100%. Both great points. I mean, it only time will tell and see if things work out here. I mean, in the past, I've questioned other general managers like Kyle Davidson in Chicago, and I think he's really turned that ship around. So hopefully the same comes true for Mike Grier here. We wish nothing but the best for him and the San Jose Sharks. But moving on to our next storyline, we have just the fact that if they do poorly, which we all project that they will, we all project they're going to be at the very bottom of the standings. Yeah, it's not much of an if, but they could be huge players at the deadline, selling players that they've recently acquired, like Mike Hoffman, Jan Ruta. we do have to mention again that they only have one retention spot left, so that'll likely be used on Mike Hoffman to retain half of his $5 million cap hit. Jan Ruda is probably desirable enough at his cap hit currently. So those guys, and then Granlund in the future. He's on a 2 year deal, so he'll probably get traded in 2 years at the deadline, as well as a guy like Duclair and Blackwood. If those guys are able to come in and kind of up their value again, maybe they'll be pretty important trade chips for contending teams.
For sure.
Yeah, adding to that, you got to wonder how much risk are you willing to take to acquire such players before the deadline? You're thinking, how many games am I going to get out of Anthony Duclair, and how well is he going to do in a very new city? I know he's someone that's bounced around, and a lot of these guys are. Mike Hoffman's been around the block, many teams, many different cities, but you kind of wonder, how are they going to do in the games I need them to do well in order to be valuable to ship him out?
Yeah, this is
Yeah,
also Mike Hoffman's second stint in San Jose, so we'll see if he does better than his what was it, like a day he was a Shark last time?
less than a day.
Less than a day.
Probably
Which
an hour.
yeah, exactly. Just one final point there is, if they are able to move Mike Hoffman and Jan Ruda, we might look back at the Erik Karlsson trade more favorably if they're able to accrue a couple more draft picks from that trade. It might make a lot more sense. So maybe Mike Greer's out here playing chestnut checkers. Moving on to the next storyline, we got coast to coast hockey trademark term. Just kidding, but we did come up with this. Slackin for Macklin. As any bad team is going to be doing, they're going to be looking towards the future. And the guy who appears to be next up at this point is Macklin Salabrini, the top Canadian forward prospect. I mean, Nick, if you had any thoughts on him here.
Yeah, he's an uber talented kid. He's definitely someone that you look to as like, this is another American player, but he's actually from Vancouver, BC. So he's one of those super skilled, super ready, nose for the net, ready to get grimy in the corners and take the puck out. Off wall play is incredible. He's ready to pot pucks. He played in the USHL with Chicago, and now he's off to college. So you kind of wonder if he takes a similar route to Adam Fantilli and has similar success as Adam Fantilli was, breaking records, being close to what Eichel was producing when he was in college. So you're looking at a possible stud in the making.
It's very exciting as Canadian fans of hockey just to see all this great crop of talent coming up with Bedard, Fantilli, and now Macklin's the next guy up. So now we just have an overview slide of kind of our final thoughts on the San Jose Sharks generally. So grading some of the things that have happened here recently, looking at a grade for the offseason, we're going to give them a B minus. This is because even though the return for the Erik Karlsson trade was underwhelming, like we said, they have the possibility to maybe get some more assets at the next two trade deadlines for Mikael Granlund, Mike Hoffman, and Jan Ruta. So if you're starting to add more draft compensation to that first round pick they got from Pittsburgh, it could be an all right trade. And I mean, I think they bought low on Anthony Duclair as somewhat of a cap dump. So pretty high risk, high reward. As Nick has alluded to, he's had a pretty extensive injury history. So hopefully he's able to have a good year, and maybe they'll package him up again at the deadline. And then again, they also bought low on Mackenzie Blackwood. But the reason that this grade's a bit depressed is they're not giving opportunities to their young players like William Macklin. So those moves are a bit questionable from that perspective. But in a vacuum, they're solid moves, and buying low on some players who have some pedigree and might be able to contribute by way of some draft compensation in the future.
Like
As
Zadina
for
as well.
Oh, exactly.
Sorry to cut you
Exactly.
off there. Yeah.
Yep. Oh no, you're good. Another buy low, sell high, hopefully. But
Hmm.
he's a guy who might be part of the future of San Jose if he works out.
Yeah,
And
for sure.
then moving on to the grades of the actual team construction. So we gave offensive strength a C plus, defensive strength a C, and goaltending strength a C minus. All pretty bleh grades. Like they're probably not the worst constructed team in the NHL, but nothing really pops out. They don't really have any star players at this point in time, so we'll just have to see how depleted this team looks after the trade deadline. And yeah, so moving on to the future outlook, they have a pretty extensive pool of prospects. like we've mentioned, some really great centers coming up. So a B plus there, as they're kind of just at the initial phase of the rebuild. That grade should go up in years to come as Mike Greer continues to add to their prospects.
And moving
So,
on to the projected wildcard standings
yep.
here, we have both Cameron and myself had San Jose as the worst rated team in the NHL, 32 out of 32. I know Nick had them 31st. They will be, well, at least in our opinion, last in the wildcard race in the Western Conference. Nick, I don't know if you want to go into your ratings a bit.
Sure. I had them 31st. I had Chicago finishing last in the league, therefore last in the Western Conference wildcard standings. We'll be going through each of these teams in reverse order of the average of our three rankings. Therefore, San Jose averaged the worst. So we don't see them making the playoffs this year. So fans are going to have to look forward to what should be a stellar deadline and a rebuild.
Mhm.
Thank you so much for watching, guys. Please like, comment, and subscribe, and welcome to the new channel. We're really excited to get started here. Thanks.
Thank you guys.